It's great to be able to see everybody's face, and really just great to be having this interaction with the class of 2020. I've been a big ALI fan, and it's not just because both my board chair and vice chair are ALI alums. There's a guy by the name of Lewis Mumford. He was probably the greatest critic of architecture and urban life in 20th century America. But in 1956, 8 years before he would go and win the Presidential Medal of Freedom, he wrote a cover story in Architectural Record. He was writing about aging. He starts this article by saying, at no point in any society had any group been so rejected as older people today. But Mumford was a problem solver. He said, we've got to fix this. We can fix this. And he offered two prescriptions. One was avoid at all costs infantilizing older people and turning later life into a kind of second childhood. But then he went on to make the point that he was most urgent about. He said, whatever we do, we can't cut older people off from mainstream society. The title of the article was, For Older People, Not Segregation, Integration. That very year, 1956, that Mumford's article appeared, a guy by the name of Big Ben Schleifer was putting the finishing touches on the first age-segregated retirement community in America, built around doing exactly the opposite of everything that Lewis Mumford counseled. The town was called Youngtown, and it was the first age-segregated community for older people in America. And I don't have to tell you whose vision caught on. It wasn't Lewis Mumford, who would go on to these great accolades. It was actually Big Ben Schleifer. A profound turning point in a transition that America was going through in the 20th century. But it's really important to see what happened in the Arizona desert in the 1950s and 1960s as part of a larger sweep. So America began the 20th century as the most age-integrated society in the world and ended it as the most age-segregated. In the early part of the 20th century, we decided that we were going to make things more efficient, and we did it, and often for the most uplifting and progressive reasons. Child labor laws, universal schooling led young people to move into a set of institutions for young people only. But the end result was the twains between ages stopped meeting. Young people were in schools, middle people in workplaces, and older people in a set of institutions like Youngtown and Sun City and nursing homes. And we've created a society that actually runs against the grain of most of what we know from human development, even evolution. I want to argue that this is a grievous wound, this reorganization of society that we accomplished during the 20th century. But I don't want to be depressing. I want to channel the spirit of Lewis Mumford and say, not only do we need to fix this, but that we can fix this, and we have some profound allies on our side in doing that. We older people need to be irrationally crazy about the younger generation. The Harvard study of adult development in its 83rd year has found that relationships are the key to happiness in later life. He says that there's a direction to all of that connection, and it's downhill. That he found that older people who connect with younger people are 3 times as happy as those who fail to do so. It explains some of the tragedy of all of this disconnection, this wedge that we've driven between younger and older people. But I'm not here to be depressing, but hopeful, because I genuinely am hopeful. Not only is fixing this align with the grain of human development. We rerouted the river of life, but I think we're wired to return it to its natural course. But it's happening already all over the world in ways that are oftentimes not put together and seen as a pattern. For me, I feel like there are 3 larger lessons that come out of all of this innovation that's developing all around the world. One is a kind of ethos that rather than trying so hard to be young, we need to actually be there for those who are. And the second around the idea of innovation, which is that we've got to be as creative in the 21st century in bringing people together as we were in the 20th century and splitting them apart. And I think the final lesson I take, we've got a lot of small promising things out there, but very little at the kind of scale that's needed, that's commensurate with the problem, with the opportunity. I think we've been in danger of losing a fundamental part of the human experience. And Lewis Mumford understood that. He said, every generation revolts against its parents and falls in love with its grandparents. And if you look at every cultural tradition, there are words along those lines, but my favorite is a Greek proverb which says, society grows great when older people plant trees under whose shade they shall never sit. And I can think of no better benediction or prescription for how we make the most of the multi-generational society that's already washing over us.